Hello and welcome to another episode of the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. This week we cover everything that happened at the Monterey Car Week. Kyle drives 4 really fun cars, and we discuss the question of the week that may take an hour just to answer. But first, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, so we'll get started with the 4 sport car comparison shootouts, something I helped set up, kind of started setting it up, and then I booked myself out of it, so I didn't get to drive anything. So I'm pretty sad because these cars are all awesome. I'll let you tell us how it was.
Well, it was a lot of driving, but in the best way possible. We actually got some very strange weather that week. So we got flash downpours. We got really sunny, nice weather. We had a lot of highway driving to get to our excellent back road section. It was a pretty thorough test, and we insisted on scoring it. We didn't just want to go by vibes. And the weirdest thing was that we ended up with a tie. I think that's fine. I think we might as well spoil some of the results on the podcast, right? Maybe.
Sure. I mean, maybe people will go and see if they don't agree at all why you would have said that.
Yeah. And I mean, go watch the video. But yeah, we ended up in a tie for last place, which was the Mazda MX-5 Miata and the new for 25 Mini Cooper S. And the shock there, yeah, they're basically the same. The shock there was, I mean, both of them did things very well. And then whatever they did poorly, the other car did very well. So the Miata, not a great interior. I don't think any of us have ever waxed lyrical about that interior. Meanwhile, the Mini is probably one of the most fun and enjoyable interiors I can think of for anything under 50,000. It's just a really nice place to spend time. And yeah, that helped balance out the Mini's score because it is very expensive. It's not the most fun to drive, at least compared to these 3.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they ended up with exactly the same points.
I gotta say, the Mini Cooper S is a ton of fun. I haven't driven the new one, but I'm sure it continues it. But when you put it against these 3, it's a little different. And like you said, it's having not driven them, I totally know. Well, the Miata is probably the most fun, or one of the most fun, but easily the least practical. And the Mini's easily the most practical, but it might just miss out on a little bit of the rawness of the other 2. But that's because it's a fully usable car and not a sort of a sporty toy.
Well, so we said we might not have said it in the article or in the video. It might be in another video coming later this summer. But the Mini has the potential for greatness because it's still a very fun platform in the sense that it's small. It's fairly grippy. It is on all-season tires, so But the problem isn't so much that they got rid of a manual for this generation. That's fine. We knew it was happening. The problem is that there's no way to really control the automatic transmission in there, the dual clutch. There is a little toggle to switch it into L, and then there's different drive modes to make it a little more urgent. But there's no way to manually control which gear you're in, and that just ruins the interaction, right? I want even paddle shifters, and it's a Cooper S.
Yeah.
It should have those.
Like my Sierra I'm driving right now has paddle shifters. I wonder why they didn't put on the Mini.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So that was the small problem there. Apologies. You might hear my dog's nails clicking around here. He's wandering. Then second place was the car that the three of us, the 3 judges, all thought was probably the best performance choice, which was the Toyota. The GR86 and the BRZ TS, the GR86 Trueno and the BRZ TS are very similar, just like the regular versions of those cars. But the GR86 just has a little bit better body control, and so it was the best one to drive, but it's a little more expensive.
So the Subaru balanced out on price, basically.
Yeah, and how we scored this, because we deal with both Canadian and US pricing, is we took both prices from both countries and then averaged. And so, yeah, the Subaru is the winner on price, because while it is slightly more expensive than the Toyota in the US, in Canada, it is a wicked deal. It's barely more money in numbers in Canada than it is in the US. So, yeah,
Sounds like
it's
a trend with those special Subarus.
yeah.
I remember us
Isn't that
saying this
weird?
with the RS and TR before. It'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see where the TS WX ends up once both countries price it too.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
But
So it was a ton of fun, and while we did score them, and the Subaru is the winner in this one, honestly, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for picking any of these. They're all a ton of fun in very different ways, and they're consistently less than the average new car price in 2024. So there are affordable, fun cars out there. Just, maybe not as many as there were back in the day.
it's too bad the manual EcoBoost Mustang's gone, because I was going to say these four and throw that in, and I'd have a different car each day of the week to drive. That would give me a ton of fun.
Yeah, and that would have been a very different idea, right? Because these ones are all more on the small side of the scale. Yeah.
I guess a base Z isn't going to be too much more than some of these. I mean, you miss out on some of the performance stuff, but you still have 400 horsepower.
Yeah, base Z is a little over 40,000, so it's a little above these, but not by much.
Yeah.
You're going to end up with an interior closer to the Miata, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to a car that doesn't have a bad interior. So, as we said, it's Monterey Car Week, and a lot of manufacturers really went all out this year. I mean, usually you get a bit of news, but it was like an auto show there. I guess everyone's market research said, hey, release things here. And it being a higher end show, we got a lot of cool higher end cars. So I'll let you talk about this. What do they call it? Just the Speedster?
Yeah, it's a 911 Speedster. It's rare because this is only the third 993 generation Speedster ever. One was built for Ferdinand Alexander Porsche in the 90s, and then another was for a private owner in 2001. And so this is wholly new. It was based off a 94 Cabriolet, built as part of the, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, Porsche, Sonderwunsch, the special requests division. And they worked with an Italian collector who really loves 911 Speedsters, and he's also a designer. So he worked very closely with the company to create this. It's got, nods to the old cars, like with the rock protector just ahead of the rear wheels. It's got some 911 turbo bits in the front, like in the front spoiler. Slightly changed lights. So it's got modern, the light signature for current Porsches with the 4 points. It's got that, but he redesigned the cap for the Speedster, the cut line, so that it is a little more modern. Yeah, it's a very pretty car. Not that
So
the 993 wasn't already, but
yeah, I was gonna say. So is this his car or is this Porsche keeping it?
it's his car. It
Okay,
is
that's too
debuting
bad.
here, and then they are flying
be
it
decent.
back to Europe for him to enjoy. I mean,
You
I
mean
assume
park in his
enjoy.
garage and never drive?
Well, yeah, I assume enjoy. I'm hoping.
So for the non-Porsche nerds or car nerds, 993 is the generation of 911 from the, yeah, I guess early to mid 90s. So
Yeah, it was
this
pretty
isn't a
short.
new car they built. They've taken an old, like 30-year-old car almost. Well, yeah, pretty much 30-year-old car and modernized it, kind of resto modded it. It's something that happens all the time, but it's very unusual for a manufacturer to do it and to do it to this scale and degree.
Yeah. So I think Porsche is going to start doing this a little bit more, and it's something we've seen Ferrari do. I mean, they usually do new cars, but they do one-offs now, and it seems like if you show up with a bag of money, they'll make pretty much whatever you want. One of my favorite facts about this is this color is a unique color called Auto Yellow, and it is named after the owner's dog.
Ah, it must be yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ferrari F8 Tributo. That's one,
Yeah.
triple the price of the car. Moving into something just as exciting. I'm joking, but this is actually way more relevant to way more people. The new terrain has come out, and it is an all new model. It looks very similar at first, but the headlights are smaller and they don't see into the grille and hood as much, and the rear lights don't have that C shape anymore at all. It's got a lot of carryover mechanics, which isn't a surprise because it in the uh, uh, I'm having a mind blank. The Equinox are
There we go.
somewhat related. So it still has the 1.5 and it's still around, I think, 170 horsepower. But the most interesting thing is the 9-speed auto's gone, and they've got an 8-speed. I don't know if there's ever been a really good 9-speed made. They always seem to have problems. Not problems like mechanically.
Mercedes has good 9 speeds.
Oh yes, well it's a rear drive, so that's a little different. But anyway, yeah. So the 8-speed is the same, I think, that was used in some of their siblings. So I'm interested to drive it because I want to see if that makes much of a difference, and just sort of what the new car's like. And of course, it's a new GMC, so it's got big screens and nicer interior and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have nothing to add to that.
And then moving on back to fancy cars that are worth more than houses. The Lamborghini successor to the Huracan was finally announced. I mean, they've been teasing it forever, and they gave it a name, and we got to see it. And I'll let you try to say the name.
I was gonna say that was a masterful just dodge.
Yeah,
There's Mario and there's Wario, and now there's Temerario. I know there's got to be some sort of accent because I don't speak Italian.
I'm sure, like everyone said hurricane and ended up being Huracan.
Yeah,
it's probably like Tamario or something. Who knows?
Yeah. But no, it's going green. It's dropping 2 cylinders, shrinking its engine down to a 4-liter turbo V8, and then adding 3 electric motors, so it has 907 horsepower, and it also revs to 10,000 RPM.
This is like one of the first cars in recent memory where it's like the car that keeps giving, because they're like, we're gonna build our own. They're said it's gonna be a 4-liter turbo V8, and we're like, oh. But they're like, we're gonna build it ourselves. We're like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, and it's gonna go over 10,000 RPM, and then it's also a hybrid, and it's gonna make over 800 horsepower. Now it's at 907, and that's the start. Like, this thing can probably make 1,100 horsepower, and it's just gonna slowly increase over the years with each new model, like they do with all their cars. Like, this will be the LP 900 or something, and then the 950 will come out, and then the 1,000.
And that's the thing is, like, this is a turbo model. This is not a naturally aspirated V10 where they eke out an extra 10 horsepower and they're like, but we did it. New model. It's like, this will be, we slightly changed the boost. Here's 50 more horsepower. Like, I would not be surprised, like you said, if this is cracking 1,000 horsepower once we get into the Superleggera successor.
Well, and there's also those 3 electric motors, which it's very easy to change power there. Say, we'll cut off 20 miles of range and toss in 300 more horsepower. Like, with EVs, it's just how do you want to program, basically, the motors capabilities. But when you got 3, that's a lot.
Yeah, and it looks cool. It definitely evolves this. I want to say restrained. I realize that that's just because we're used to Lamborghini being wild. A little more restrained styling. It's a little calmer, but I really like these hexagonal lights down in the in the front of the bumper. I think it's a cool touch that's going to make this easily recognizable.
Yeah, I really like the styling. Like, it's nothing dramatic. I mean, they've all looked the same since the Countach to a degree. They've always kept the family styling. But yeah, when I first saw this, it's sort of like almost an Aventador or what's the new one?
Revuelto?
Yeah, with like some video game body kit on. Like, it totally looks like it's in the family, and I really like the look. It's it's very sleek, and it'll probably be here for the next 10 years, so that's good, and it'll keep expanding, and I'll wait for the 2,000 horsepower final edition.
And also, good choice with the green Lamborghini.
Yeah, green seems to be in right now. Everyone's making green. Moving on to something else, electric power.
Acura, we talked about this last week.
Yeah, so Acura released the concept that they teased, and surprise, surprise, I was right. It's a crossover. Although
you were right,
they're not using the words, and it's a very crazy looking crossover, and apparently it's going to production, and it's got to change because this is like a two-door with a tiny cabin. But I think the styling is what they mean is going to go, and it'll be like a probably a four-door, and probably I would guess a size up from the ZDX. I can't imagine they'd make a smaller one already. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, MDX
Well,
size maybe no third row, but like the MDX coupe basically.
did they say when it's going into production? Because we know that the ZDX, sorry, is a one and done kind of thing because it's the only Altium model that Acura is going to build. So could this be the replacement? Are we already looking
Already.
at the replacement?
I don't know. I mean, Acura doesn't have a history of showing a concept car and taking a while to get it to production. I mean, the NSX was like 6 months from what I remember, or was that a decade? I can't quite remember with the last NSX, but
Definitely one or the other.
Yeah, you're right. This could just be the next. I think too, it could just be this is the new styling direction, which you can't really judge right now. I mean, looking at this in pictures, I'm not a fan, but you have no idea how it's going to translate in real life. And this is a concept where you go over the top with a lot of the stuff, and when it's toned down, who knows? I mean, I think they have pretty good styling right now, so
they do.
We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
There are elements of this that I like. I realize that we're talking about styling on a podcast, but like the negative volumes in the doors and the lack of creases, like it's more just a flowing form, is very nice. I'm not sure about the Buick and Vista headlights. That's a choice, but yeah, well, you're right though. Like Acura very rarely shows a concept just for the hell of it these days. So curious to see what comes of this in the next 6 months to a decade.
Yeah, because when we saw the sort of concept teasing about the ZDX, like it came the same with the Integra. So
yeah.
All right. So moving on to a German automaker again, the BMW M5 Touring that every car nerd loves, and BMW will sell at least a dozen in North America. We got all of the details finally.
We did, and it's surprise, basically the same as the sedan, just longer and thus cooler. Yeah, it's
heavier.
It is heavier. It's 140 pounds heavier, so it is now over 5,500 pounds.
You want an SUV alternative? Here's something that weighs just as much, but it's
weirdly more. I'm pretty sure this weighs more than any X model, save for the XM, because the XM is the same powertrain. So this is a plug-in hybrid. It's 717 horsepower. It's a 10th slower to 62 miles per hour than the sedan, probably because of the weight. But I imagine it's actually, like, aerodynamic wise, it's probably pretty close, if not better, than the sedan because, you know, long roof. It looks cool. I like the taillights because they're more traditional BMW. They have the upwards L shape at the outer edges. You can haul a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's very cool, but also, yeah, it's like you said, it's for car nerds to go wild over, but most of the people who are really praising this are probably not potential buyers. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So two things. First, there's very few universal stereotype or phrases, or just there's no disputing it in the automotive world. And one of them is wagons are better than sedans. Always. I mean, if there's this wagon option, that's what you go for. It's always the better one. And two, yeah, this kind of feels like a bit of a halo, but not for the brand, but for like the brand to get the BMWists and the car nerds that are like, oh, look at that M5 Touring, and then they go and buy a 230 or, you know, an X1. But I mean, that's how things have always worked. It's people don't build these crazy cars because they think they're going to be earth-shattering profit. It's to boost your image and get people in the showroom. So
yeah, and
it'll work.
One thing I want to say, props to BMW, because this will be the only wagon that you can buy in North America, because of course. But they're not even trying to hide it the way that Mercedes and Audi did, where with the A6 and the RS6 or the E-Class and the E63, there are off-road oriented versions of those that you can buy as well. And it's like, oh, look, it's a wagon. It's a little more off-roady, but it's not an SUV. BMW is not even doing that. There is no off-roady 5 Series wagon that's coming here. It's only the M5 Touring. If you want a wagon, you're getting the hardcore one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like the E-Class, the all-terrain, that's all there was for years. So good for them. Maybe they can walk it back and start putting another 5 Series drivetrains. Oh, imagine an i5 wagon. That'd be awesome.
Oh, so good.
Do a BMW. All right, and flipping back to a different SUV that actually weighs more. Lincoln unveiled a new Navigator with bigger screens because they've been playing the screen wars against GM lately. And apparently, there's a spa feel to the flagship. And before I get into it, first off, this is probably the most radical design change in the sense of the nose in quite some time on the Navigator. I mean, the body, like an Escalade, is always going to be the same because it's a giant box. Like that's what these are. But
yeah,
it's got more family resemblance while still looking fresh. So good for Lincoln.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote this up, and this color is nice too. I think it works because it gives them a very different approach. It's not super glitzy the way that an Escalade is. That being said, the back end, Lincoln has tried to adopt the Nautilus look with its wraparound taillight to the giant square back end of the Navigator. I personally don't think it looks great, but it's distinctive. And now it's a split tailgate too. So that's nice. And like you pointed out, inside, very different. Huge screen like the Nautilus. There's a lot of Nautilus influence here. It's funny because the huge screen doesn't actually go pillar to pillar like it does in the Nautilus because we're in such a big vehicle. But yeah, the spa feel is this big move towards a multi-sensory relaxation chamber, right? Like people who own these, they probably are doing big miles, or they are doing a lot of, they're on the road a lot is the idea I think that Lincoln is trying to get across here. And so maybe they want to take a break and really relax. And so you hit the Lincoln Rejuvenate program, and the seat will move back, it'll recline, it'll start massaging you while gently heating up, not radically heating up, because that wouldn't be, spa-like. And then the screen and the speakers, it's a 28 speaker setup. It'll start playing a calming sound. You'll get images on the screen. It'll start spraying some scents into the cabin. It's all just about relaxing. Cool.
So as you were talking about that, I hadn't looked at the back, but now I just did, and I see the taillight and the split. I'm thinking Lincoln and Cadillac have spent so many years trying to get X7 and GLS buyers and Q7 buyers to look at these trucks instead and seriously take them, and they just never got them to jump over. I think Lincoln said, "Screw that, we're going straight for Range Rover instead." And they have the split tailgate like a Range Rover, and Range Rover has a more pronounced sort of arc of connected to lights. It's not all lights, but they have that black strip and then the taillights are blacked out. So there's a little nod there. So you know what? I haven't driven it, obviously, and I haven't been in the interior, but that might not be a bad idea because a Range Rover buyer is more likely to think, oh, here's a more affordable big truck that gives me some of the experience as opposed to trying to get someone out of a more car like X7. So, what? They might be onto something.
Point. Yeah. Is that everything for us, Mike?
Yes.
So it is, because it's been a lot this week.
It has. Well, because there was a lot.
Yeah.
We haven't got to our question yet, but you are going to have a talk with Toyota in a little bit because that's where you were this week, and we'll get into that later. But before that, we're going to do our question of the week. We'll take a 2-second break and be right back. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With the parts you need at the prices you want, and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, they're guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Okay, so we are back. This week, Kyle came up with the question of the week, I think inspired by one of our news stories, so I'll let you take it away.
It's true. I was inspired by the Navigator. No, my question for us this week, and I'm sure listeners have had this thought before. What 90s era car would you do a one-off resto mod to? retro mod, resto mod, either way. And since I'm leading the charge on this one, it feels fair that I pick the first one. And there were a few choices, but I think one that will probably resonate with a lot of people is the first generation Lexus LS.
Oh, well, what would you
Yeah.
drop in it?
I think I would drop a hybrid powertrain from Lexus.
The
Maybe,
600H.
maybe, yeah, maybe I don't know. I don't love that one, but that's probably the most refined one, and so it makes the most sense. Maybe a plug-in. I don't know.
Well, I think for either, batteries could be a problem where they go, because that car was never designed to take them.
Ooh,
But
yeah. Okay. Well,
you just lose your
all
trunk.
right. I mean, maybe we just keep that V8 anyway because it is incredibly smooth. Or put in one of the current. Oh, wait a minute. How about I just stick the LC's 5-liter V8 in there?
Ooh, that's the best choice. I was thinking the Tundra's hybrid max, but yeah, you're on a better track there.
And then reskin the interior, put in a lot of really nice materials. Just update it tastefully, bring it up to modern standards in the way that it needs. But otherwise, that first LS is just so effortlessly luxurious that I would very much like to keep that alive.
Okay, well, I have two, so I'll start with one in case you have a second one. My first one is right there, hanging on my wall. For those who aren't watching, the Subaru SVX, one of my favorite cars ever. It would just be such a great candidate because that shape is still crazy, even like 30 years later. Um, the the easiest and most sensible and truest thing to do would swap in an STI drivetrain, and there's actually been many WRX and STI drivetrains swapped in them because I mean you gut out the transmission and everything, but it doesn't take much to adopt it. I think I'd want to go a little crazier because I want it to be something like just loud and cool. So I'm gonna cram an LS in there, make it just rear drive. It'll fit. I mean, that flat six can't be. I can't imagine it being bigger than a push rod V8. Or
It
sorry,
probably
smaller.
weighs. It probably weighs more than the LS.
Oh yeah, and it's like if you saw it, because I own one, it is a giant lug. The only thing is maybe it sticks up a little too high, but I'll just put a little hood bulge or maybe a scoop. It's Subaru, right? Yeah, and then I wouldn't change much on the outside. I mean, you need more modern wheels and exhaust, but inside, I would get somehow a digital screen for the driver information center, and the center stack that had the radio and the climate and all that. I'd somehow try to make that a screen, and then it'd be like a modern SVX that is Chevy powered and very loud.
Cool.
So
I like that.
So
Since you have a
do you have a
second one, yeah, I'll go with a second one just so because I want to hear what yours is. So
You
my
probably
second, no, I do now. It's an Aurora. So my one would be it's a little late 90s, but the clown shoe, the BMW Z3M
yeah.
Coupe. I would just,
yeah.
yep. I don't need much to change. Throw in probably the E90, the M3 V8 there.
Yeah. Oh, the
Put it in.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean,
Naturally
the
aspirated.
/C4, that could work well too. But you're right, the V8 would sound better.
Yeah, I want the V8, and then I probably would want to update and, like you said, like put some screens in the interior. I get the classic BMW interior look; it's fine, but like I'd want to do that. But that's my call. Maybe put, you know what? If I'm going for a one-off, like cost no object, maybe I want some nice wood in the back for the load bay. Make it look super classy. Yeah.
I always liked those cars. I know people hated the look, and it was one of those when you saw pictures, you're like, "Oh my god!" But when you saw it in the proportion, especially in the back end, it just looked so cool.
Yeah,
and you don't see them much. Like people who had them held on to them. Yeah. Oh no, those are two great choices. Now for something completely different. It is another picture on my wall, but it is not the Aurora. It is the one above it. It is the Alero. So I'm gonna grab an Alero coupe,
of course,
and I'm gonna redo all the lighting. So they'll be the same size and shape, but LEDs, of course, LED headlights, LED fogs, LED tails. I would outline the shape of the tail lights, some nicer wheels inside. That could use a lot of work. It was all integrated into the dash, so I guess I'm looking at building a custom dash with some digital elements and whatnot that somehow hook up to the rest of the car. But yeah, I just want one of those. And I thought about what I could do to it. You could do something crazy and try to convert it to rear drive, but you probably bend the car in half, or all wheel drive WX. But no, it's front wheel drive. It's going to stay that way. And I think it's going to get the motor it always deserved. And that's the Acura Integra Type S engine.
Oh, like the current one.
Yeah. The 315 horsepower turbo just shoved under that. Torque steer for days.
Yeah. You might want to get the Integra suspension too. Just throwing it out there.
I think I can need about 300 pounds of chassis braces as well, so it literally doesn't try to rip itself apart. But
it'll still be lighter than an M5.
I was thinking the Cobalt SS Turbo, because it had an Ecotec. Like, that probably wouldn't be an insane swap, but this is fantasy money. Let's just go crazy.
Yeah, why not?
Of course, that's not going to ever happen, but there are more sensible cars, but this is not our money, and we're just going crazy. Like, yeah.
No, yeah.
Aurora V8 in the Valero would be kind of cool too. That's keeping to the brand, but then you have an unreliable engine and an unreliable car, so that's not a good combo.
Yeah, and V8 front drivers are something that GM did experiment with.
Hey man, no one's ever been as creative as they were with that GXP Pontiac, where the front tires are 30 millimeters wider than the rear to help offset it. It was a great idea. Okay, so anyway, this is going on. Let's hear a word from our sponsor. This is the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. And when we come back, it'll just be Kyle talking to Toyota. Then I'll be on with Colum after that, and we'll discuss what's next. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Okay, everyone, let's take a minute and talk about the one that got away. The vehicle you once owned and for whatever reason had to get rid of, and to this day fully regret ever doing so. For me, it's my Subaru SVX. It was a 1997 model, which was one of the last years it was ever sold here. It was black on the outside and it had the beige leather and suede interior. It was in amazing condition for its age because it was just a one-owner vehicle. The interior was near flawless. The paint was pretty good considering it was about a 20-year-old car when I got it. I just loved everything about it. I loved the quirkiness because I love oddball cars. I love the window within the window, the power button on the gear shifter, the way the dash was laid out and you could hide the radio behind the fake wood panel. The flat six was just so smooth and it was all-wheel drive, and although it wasn't overly quick, it still had enough power. The problem was, within a year of buying that car, I ended up selling it because I got a great deal on another vehicle. And to this day, I regret doing so. Part of the reason I sold it was, although it was in great shape, it wasn't perfect and there were things that needed to be fixed, like the air conditioner, reservoir, some bearings, and other bits. And back then there was no eBay guaranteed fit program, so finding parts for such a rare 20-year-old car was not easy. Luckily, I sold it to someone who not only cared for it, but took the time to fix it up. And every once in a while, I do get to still see it, and I still regret ever getting rid of it. I am constantly online looking for a new SVX because now I have a system that I can find parts for it, but I haven't come across one that's both in the right condition and the right price range. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I have a special guest, in fact, a few special guests here, but I'm going to introduce our main special guest for this episode of the podcast, who is Stephen Beatty. Stephen, say hello.
And thanks for having me on.
So, Stephen, can you let the listeners know what your official title is?
I'm Stephen Beatty. I'm Corporate Secretary at Toyota Canada Inc., and we're here somewhere in Cape Breton at the moment on the first leg of a cross-country tour to support our 60th anniversary as a company in Canada.
Yes, we've already started, well, kilometer zero, not mile zero. Kilometer zero in Newfoundland
and now we're almost to Halifax.
A few hours yet.
A few hours, yes. Stephen, thanks for having us along for the ride. Can I ask, because, as an outlet that does a lot of both US and Canadian stuff, a lot of people think that the markets are more or less the same. How important was it to you to have this distinctly Canadian event, and what really diversifies those two markets in your mind?
Well, I guess there are a bunch of differences. One is we started off as an independent distributor here in Canada. The company was formed in 1964, which is about 6 years after things got started in the U.S. And I think if you look at the kind of Canadian sensibility about cars, Canadians were looking for small, affordable vehicles, and Toyota really just fit in with the times. As was the case in the U.S., obviously when the 70s hit and we had the oil shocks, then that really propelled sales rather. But even in the early days, Canadians were just looking for something that was affordable, that would stand up for the long haul, and that didn't use a lot of gas. And I think if you look at that history, the very first Japanese cars assembled in North America were assembled here in Nova Scotia. Turns out they were Corolla. Corolla's gone on to become the number one selling nameplate in the history of the automobile. And it has really been the backbone of everything that we've done as a company.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to pull a brand new Corolla up to the spot, the location of the original plant earlier today.
Well, it was fun, actually. It helps us come full circle and really bring that heritage together.
Talking about full circle, how convenient or how fortuitous that we have the two of the original nameplates.
Yeah, so that's it. We when we started thinking about this, we at our 60th anniversary, it made sense for us to do something special, and then we started to go back and look at the history and said, well, what got us launched here? And it turned out that it was the Crown, the Land Cruiser, and the 700 UP, but that is long lost to history. But of course, this year we have a whole new Land Cruiser and the new Crown Signia, and we thought that would be really appropriate for us to drive both vehicles across the country, and then sprinkle in the rest of the 20 to 24 different models in the Toyota lineup that Canadians have come to know and love.
One of the advantages of being the only full line automaker left.
It is a real advantage. I will say that at times I think it's also challenging for our dealers, because not only do they have to be up on every one of those models, but they also have to understand any competitor that exists in the marketplace. And so the amount of training and support that happens down at the dealership level is really quite incredible. And I salute them every day. They're the folks who make this whole thing work, and we're here 60 years on because of an exceptionally strong network.
I just realized that we've been talking about this 60th anniversary and we're talking about the Ken Recchi, but can we just touch on the specific importance of Ken Recchi for listeners? Because I realize we've taken it for granted the last few days.
Right. So, I guess if we were doing this the traditional Canadian way, we'd call it a diamond anniversary or something along those lines. But in Japanese culture, the 60th is actually something quite special. It's the time in your life where you've gone through the Chinese zodiac 5 times, and you're back in the symbol of your birth. So Ken Recchi in Japanese culture is that moment of rebirth. It's a time to reflect on the past, think about the present, but really, start to imagine what the future might be like. And it just seemed really appropriate here in our 60th to follow that same pattern and go across Canada and trace the story.
It's been fun so far, and speaking of reflecting on the past and looking towards the next steps, Stephen, we know that you're stepping down at the end of this year. Moving away.
I am, and I'm not to say that I'm looking forward to it, because I'm going to miss everything about the day-to-day of the auto industry, and frankly working with guys like you. But it's also a good time to go do some other things, and I'm looking forward to that. But what I do know is I got a really good team most of which is sitting behind us in the car at the moment.
Yes.
It'll be there to to support you and support your readers and viewers.
So, on the note of reflecting, can you give us a short rundown of maybe your favorite Toyota cars over your history with the company?
Okay, well, I think it has to start before my history with the company because, I wouldn't have agreed to come on with Toyota had I not already had a very positive opinion about them at the time they hired me, which was late '90s. But when I was a teenager, that was the time that the first Celica came out, and it was the one that really changed people's minds about what a Japanese car was all about. They were cool, and made me want to get on board with that. And I won't plug the fact that we've got a Matchbox version of one sitting in the car here.
It's just off screen.
Yeah. But there's that. The very first time that I went off-roading was in a Land Cruiser. Sitting in the rear jump seats sideways in the back with the metal roof, and I'm convinced that the reason I have no hair on the top of my head today is because of that metal roof, but that's a separate issue. And as we go forward, then there's one car, I think more than any other, that has sort of marked my time with the company, and that's Prius. Because when I showed up, that was just about the same time that 7 right-hand drive cars from Japan showed up with a sticky note on them saying, "See if anybody wants these." And so I spent the next couple of years going coast to coast, touring with environmental organizations, going to fall fairs, stopping people wherever I could to say, "Hey, we've got something different here, and we want to know what you think about it," and getting them to go out and test drive these cars. So to watch how what was at the time a design study for the sort of vehicles that people would need to drive early in the next century evolve through multiple generations, and for the technology to spread out all across our lineup, that's been really gratifying. And to end up as Car of the Year this year was a nice way to top that off.
Yeah, seems like a good one.
Right.
I had no idea about that. Thanks for sharing it with Stevis. Wow. It's been a long day of driving. Thank you for sharing it, Stephen. And thanks for doing this interview with us. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more of the podcast. Stephen, thanks again.
Thank you.
Welcome to another F1 segment. We have Colum Wood back on to discuss more news and rumors since we're kind of in idle till the season gets back. So what do you have for us this week?
So something very interesting, actually. This total isn't 100% new, but I say it's new to me, and there's some sort of new features that have come to light. So basically, we've had this theory for a while that all these other teams have caught up to Red Bull, right? So this new theory suggests that actually that's not the case, is that Red Bull has slowed down. And the reason Red Bull has slowed down is that basically the FIA caught them doing something. So there's a couple of new articles out there. There's a gentleman by the name of Antonio Lobato who writes for soymotor.com, which is, I guess, a Spanish language website. And there's a couple quotes from him that he has. And I'm just looking at who. Yeah, so basically from him, he says, "I was told from 2 different teams that they're convinced the FIA told Red Bull to change some parts. The drop-off performance is because some team found out something illegal." So basically that's what the rumors are coming out there. And so then I followed this up some more to kind of look into what this could be, right? And there's one post on Twitter from yesterday, and there's a great comment on it from a guy named Craig Scarborough, who's sort of this wizard of understanding and dissecting Formula One car technology and info and stuff like that. So he posits this idea that, and I'm not exactly sure where they're coming up with this, but this is the theory, is that it's some sort of a valve inside the brake system that would basically, the not the electronic braking, but the regular braking, that would basically alternate pressure from one caliper to the other. And so basically the rules specifically stipulate that you can't, that it has to be the same amount of pressure going to both, left and right sides. But they're so this theory is there's sort of like a hydraulic valve that would basically allow them to adjust it. And again, I'm not an expert on this, but I would say it kind of sounds to me something like it's almost like a version of a limited slip in a sense. Like cars on the road today use like electronic LSDs basically by grabbing the inside brake, but they're basically almost talking about doing the opposite, and sort of adding an extra level of limited slip capability inside their car. And then I think what happens too is maybe more importantly than even the performance gain is that it actually means more that you're just wearing your tires less. So then your tires continue to keep their grip longer into the race and gives you that added advantage over the course of many laps. So wild story. Sounds like it could be true. Who knows?
Yeah, I looked it up a bit, and you're right. It's not so much it was illegal. It's sort of like it used to be allowed, and it's kind of almost a torque vectoring too, because it's doing what a lot of manufacturers break the inside wheel more and let power go to the outside wheel to help you rotate. And like you said, it has a lot to do with tire wear, and I guess Newey had perfected this back when it was allowed, who just happened to be working for Red Bull. So the theory is that they were asked to remove it before Miami, I think, sort of when their performance went down. And Max has had some suspicious brake issues in a couple races since then. And yeah, if it was a flat out cheat, FIA would be publishing it everywhere and there'd be penalties and this and that. But
Correct.
None of us know the inner workings, and this could have been a gray area and overlooked. They weren't told to do who knows what. But like you said, people who are way smarter than us and know more about this are all convinced that this is probably what was happening just by the way the car performed and the tires lasted and all that stuff. So who knows?
I think it's one of those things where the FIA comes out and says, we think this is what's happening. We'll check on your car after the next race. Right. And they think, oh shit, let's make sure our car is like up to snuff and we know we're on the level here. And they run the up to level car, and then the car ends up not being that interesting, but they basically know if they put the trick back in, they're going to get busted. The FIA seems pretty, in some sense, lenient about that. Like a lot of those rules, they're like, we'll, when you get caught, we're going to stop you. But, you can kind of, because the reality is, this is like the great saying of racing. If you're not cheating, you're losing, right? So they're all cheating all the time. It's just who gets caught and who doesn't. Right?
Yeah. And I was going to say the exact point. They probably do it that way because if they flat out say it, then that team's going to say, well, this team's doing that and that team's doing this. And then you're just going to spend like 7 months in the rule book picking out little pieces. And as crazy as this little change sounds, like Formula One's so close. Like when we say a car's dominating, it's because it's like a thousandth faster every lap or something. So yeah, something like this can make a change. But
yeah,
I mean, if that's the reason, great. It's giving us fans way better competition. If it's not the reason, well, we're still getting the great competition. So who cares?
Yeah. It's been a great season. Very excited for the rest. So onto the more like the personnel, right? There's still a few seats left, and to be decided, and maybe some of the more obscure rumors here. So there's two ones I've seen because again, now that Carlos Sainz has gone to Williams, that Audi seat, the second Audi seat, still not filled, and everyone's kind of wondering who's going to wind up there and who they're going to fill. So. Two rumors of people who might wind up in that seat. One is Alex Palou from IndyCar, who's been a dominant force and probably could.
Pretty good.
Yeah, he could do, I'm sure, all right in F1. So it'd be great to see him. And then the other one is a name that I'm sure fewer people know. It's Gabriel Bortoleto. So he is an F2 driver. I think he's currently second in the championship. And I guess where this rumor comes from is that if you follow me on this, Fernando Alonso was spotted at the Sauber, which is the Audi, at their motorhome in Spa. So what's that got to do with it? Well, Fernando Alonso actually, in addition to all of his many things, contributing as a Formula One driver and doing whatever else he does at Aston Martin, he also runs a management agency for drivers, and Bortoleto is one of his clients. So
just on the side.
Yeah. So well, you could see. I guess I can't think of other current drivers who have management teams. I know that some of the retired ones they tend to get into that, managing future drivers and stuff like that, but maybe it's because Alonso's been a driver and then a retired driver and then a driver again. So
I think it's just when we talked about him creating those Aston Martin cars, well, putting his name on them, he's just a smart guy, and there's a reason he's still racing this far in, and he's hedging his bets on retirement. So he's got a little bit of this, a little of that. It's like, when I'm not racing or creating new Aston Martins, I'm also managing some up and comers.
Oh yeah. Alonso will be everywhere. There's an old press conference where there's a joke with him and Hamilton and someone else, and he says that he'll be like the head of the FIA someday or whatever. And they're or maybe someone suggests that, and he kind of says like something along the lines of like, oh, they've never let that happen, because he's been sort of a thorn in the side of the FIA every year he's raced. So
maybe when the Department of Justice takes over the F1 after ripping it away from Liberty Media, they'll appoint him as the guy that cleans it up.
perfect. Yeah, exactly. They'll do that. The U.S. government will run Formula One. That's going to be it.
But nothing can go wrong there.
So maybe like we're getting to the end of the summer season here. This podcast will go live in sort of the last week before we're about to go back. What do you think if we spitball on how the season ends up? Right, make some predictions. Do you think Verstappen will hold on to the end? Who's going to wind up there?
Yeah, so it's Verstappen has pretty good lead, then Norris, who's got a bit of a lead on Charles, and then is it then the two Mercedes, or is Piastri in between them?
So let me just check here. It's literally on the homepage of F1.com. Yeah, so it's Piastri's in fourth right now.
He's in fourth.
10 points behind Leclerc. Sainz is fifth, then Hamilton, Perez, Russell.
Interesting. So, well, I'll let you go first because I don't want to steal your ideas.
So my idea here is I think I don't have a lot of faith in Ferrari. I never do, right? So the fact that Leclerc is third is a little shocking to me. And actually, I'm a little surprised that he's actually that high, because I feel like Sainz had a better season. But I'm going to say that actually, I think the Lando Norris gets very close to Verstappen. Maybe we get a really exciting end of the year. But I think Verstappen holds on. I think Lando Norris is a very close second. But I think like Hamilton's going to pull himself up from like sixth all the way up to third. Like he's been doing great lately, and he just seems to be on fire. Mercedes seems to have the right car underneath them now, and I just feel like that whole team's I don't know. I feel like they've got the passion. So I think I think we'll see that wind up at the end of the year. So
I'm not too far off the same idea. I think Verstappen will still get it. I think his lead will shrink to a lot of people, but as much as I'm a huge Norris fan, I don't think he's going to catch him, and I don't think he's going to be the biggest threat in the second half. I really agree. I think it'll be Mercedes, and I didn't realize Russell was so far back, and Lewis, but I think Lewis comes all the way back to almost catching Norris, and more importantly, I think the Constructors' Championship gets real interesting because McLaren's not far off Red Bull already, and I think Mercedes will make a charge, and I think those three could be right on top of each other at the end of the year. I think it will be Verstappen, Norris, and then Hamilton, and I don't know if Russell maybe even gets up to fourth. But
yeah, so I'm looking at the points like Russell only has 116 points. So there's a pretty good gap between Hamilton's at 150 points, which is only like 12 off of Sainz and 17 off Piastri or whatever. But then you drop from Hamilton down to Perez, and you drop 19 points all the way to 131, and Russell's all the way back at 116. So Russell's pretty far back. So, but Hamilton, that whole group of, I guess Norris is 22 points ahead of Leclerc, but basically between Leclerc, Piastri, and Sainz, they're all within pretty close margin. So it's always they can just swap around at the last minute, right? It's like I know you love baseball too, right? All the teams vying for the wild card at the end of the season, they all get real close, right? And just the slightest change can just throw everything out of whack. So
my predictions then: Verstappen first, Norris second, with the smallest gap since Verstappen beat Hamilton in that last race. I guess 3-4 years ago, and then Hamilton third, and then Piastri fourth. Those will be my top four. And I think Ferrari, they got 2 wins. One of them was kind of because everyone else crashed out. So I think that I agree. I don't think they'll be around. But constructor, I have no idea. I think all 3 will be tight in the end.
Yeah, I think so too. I wouldn't be surprised to see Red Bull not win the constructors. That seems like Perez doesn't seem like pull together. Who knows? Crazy stuff could happen. Maybe Perez put Ricardo back in, and he actually revives himself somehow. I don't know. I don't see that happening, but there's a whole mess going on. And one of the crazy things is, like I said with Ferrari, if we get some super heated battles again at the front, those guys end up crashing into each other, wrecking each other, and then you get a DNF, and the Ferraris come and pick up some points just for hanging around the back. It's happened before, so I think that's what we'll really see a lot of. Is that I think the real reason probably Verstappen could hold on is because everyone else is going to steal points off of each other the rest of the season. It won't be an obviously like if Lando Norris can just be like the best driver or the second best driver all season, he'll take it. But you'll see like Lando this way race, and then it'll be a weird like, oh, Leclerc will show up somewhere, and then Hamilton will take some, and they'll just eat the points off of each other. And I guess it'll make the Red Bull's performance of the first half of the year all that more important. So
yeah, like if things continue the way they are with Norris and Piastri always being sort of top 5 each, then they'll definitely pass Red Bull. But like you said, if Mercedes starts taking some of their points away and starts making a push, it'll be interesting.
Yeah,
I like how we both are just discounting Perez being a factor at all.
Yeah, he's done. I'm blown away that he still has a job there. Like this, just at the height of motorsports. This is unbecoming of what should be happening, right? This is undeserving. So,
I mean, back to conspiracy theories, when we already talked about Red Bull and that break thing, the way every co-driver for Verstappen's so underperformed, and then some of them on other teams are decent, you got to wonder too, is like, do they really have cars that are that equal? Or is Max getting all the good parts and the other cars testing things out or getting the leftover parts?
Who knows? Get your tinfoil hat on. We're going to go down.
I mean, it's always been a question theory for decades, right? Does the top driver get a better car, even though it's supposed to be the same?
Yeah, frankly, I don't think so. I really I think they do some things better, whatever, but I really think like the better drivers stand out, and there really aren't that many of them, right? Like in any era, you've got like it's sort of in the past couple of years here, it's been I like think about Hamilton, right? Like I guess like Bottas kind of came somewhat close, but never really.
Well, he lost 1 year, right?
Hamilton.
Yeah, he lost to
Rosberg. Yeah,
Rosberg,
Nico Rosberg. That's all. So Rosberg was really good. He was actually a solid driver. Like I don't think he was he's not on one of those greatest of all time lists. Which is why I think he hated the animosity and everything in Formula One at the time with Hamilton. But I think he also realized like he got his one win and he walked out. Right? It was like a George Costanza T-bone moment. Just gonna drop the mic, walk out, and be like, I'm done. Like because there's nowhere but down after that, right? So I think he was it was a shock to everybody, but I think it was a smart move on his part. So
yeah, and back to the cars, I think at most someone might get a part a week early if they only had one built, and we hear about that every once in a while. But to consistently get outperformed, I don't think. Yeah,
and this goes to like I agree that some guys get the parts early, or whatever. But this goes to Martin Brundle. It says sometimes on races that the best drivers always wind up in the best cars. Like it's the way it is, right? So, and then if you are the best, it's the same. You get to test the new parts first. You get your choice of pit strategy if you're first versus second. You benefit the winner, the leader. So I don't think there's any shame in that. It's a meritocracy, and I guess that's how it should be.
Yeah. Well, we should probably get going. It's been a longer episode, but that's fine. So next week we'll be talking as things get started again. So that'll be interesting. Might even have some practice done before we talk next week. So we'll see how things are going.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so to wrap up a not too lengthy episode, this week, as I've talked about many times, you were off on a trip. You talked about it last week. You were driving across the Maritimes. I'm sure it was terrible and not scenic at all.
No, definitely not. As someone who's never been to Newfoundland before, Newfoundland, important difference. It was gorgeous. It was incredible. It's unlike any other part of Canada or even any other part of North America that I've been to. So that was fun. And it was in, well, not the most interesting cars, all of them, because it was a Corolla hybrid. I managed to, both Jeff Wilson and I got back into a Toyota Land Cruiser as something that we've never done before. But no, there was the GR86, the Toronto edition, actually. So that was fun to drive on very different roads. There was the Crown Signia, which is better every time I drive it. So it was really good from a road trip perspective to get into all those different cars and spend some time. I got to drive a 79 Toyota Cressida that was pretty much pristine from the largest Toyota dealer in Newfoundland. That was great. And then we took a ferry over to Nova Scotia, did the Cabot Trail, which is another thing I had never done before. And
That's awesome.
wow. Americans who are listening, if you haven't been to Big Sur, just go to the Cabot Trail instead because it's prettier.
Yeah, I've done it like 3 or 4 times, and yeah, it's amazing. The Cressida, my uncle had a later one in '85, and I remember he lent it to me for a week. Probably the first car that wasn't my parents that I ever drove for days on end, and I was just like, "Whoa, that naturally aspirated inline 6 was just so nice."
It's wild to me how modern that car was. It's a 45-year-old car, and if you blindfolded me, the only ways that I could really tell that I was in an old car were the fact that the steering wheel is about as thick as a licorice. You can like drive like this. The brake pedal is very stiff, and the brakes fade very quickly, and the doors are very thin. But other than that, it rides very comfortably. It's quiet. The automatic is pretty smooth. It was remarkable how up to date that car felt.
Well, while you're off doing all that, I was gonna have a comparison, but things changed, and it actually kind of worked out well because I got to spend a lot of time in the 24 GMC Sierra Yukon Ultimate, not Yukon, sorry, Sierra Ultimate, the pickup. And yeah, I've driven every brand's top of the line pickup at this point. I don't know how that happened, but I've been in the Ram Limited for a lot. I drove the Ford Platinum, the Toyota, what is that, Cornerstone or
Capstone.
whatever. Capstone. That's it. Oh man, I'm having a lot of memory blanks today. It's been a long week. And then this, and yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna give too much away because I still have some time to drive. But GMC is always trying to be like the luxury truck, and there's some merits to it and some not. But we'll get into that later. Next, oh wait, you've been driving something too.
Barely, because I did just get home yesterday, yesterday from when we recorded. So I only was able to drive briefly, but it's something also, in the realm of luxury. It is the 2024 Mercedes-AMG S63 E-Performance, the 800 horsepower version of Mercedes' largest sedan.
Not even the Maybach? Jeez, you're slumming it.
Slumming. Yeah.
I haven't been in S-Class in so long. I can't imagine how nice that is. You have to give us a full report down the road. In the interest of time, so next week, we actually are doing 2 comparisons. We're going to have 2 fun cars that we will talk about next week. We'll leave it as a teaser. And we're going to have a sibling rivalry of sorts, which, again, we can talk about later. But one will be very practical for consumers, and one probably no one's ever thought of doing because it's very out there, but we should have fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up. I think we just broke the 1 hour mark. So this has been the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.